Good afternoon, everybody. I found a list of essential employees, and basically, this is from 2017, but this can be a good reference of what industries are deemed essential. And I have a question here is that, if an essential employee wants hazard pay or demands a higher pay to work in these hazardous conditions, to make up the difference between the boost in unemployment benefits, from the people making 156% more on average while being on unemployment, which is two-thirds out of the 40 to 50 million plus on unemployment benefits right now. Oftentimes, they are their demand for these compensations are shut down immediately, not just by Congress or the government, but by other non-essential employees. And I would have to ask why. Okay. One argument is that you should just get a better job that pays more. Well, that's true, but you always need someone doing these jobs. That's why they're essential. So who's going to do it? Who's going to do it? Just like if you're an engineer, and you have 10 engineers and 100 people working in the factory to manufacture pieces so the engineer can create something. Well, who's going to do the grunt work and manufacture these products? You need them. Or for the rich millionaires and billionaires, or even people who buy housemaids or housemen or house cleaners, who's going to scrub the toilets? No one's going to scrub the toilet. If everybody got a better job, who's going to work at Walmart? Who's going to provide goods and services? So we have a list of these industries here, and I would have to ask, while maybe people who work in ambulatory healthcare services and hospitals can find jobs or career paths that they might find fulfilling, who wants to be the janitor? I don't know. Who wants to be the security guard at these hospitals? I don't know. Who wants to be the person who works the morgue? Well, they're all essential, but one is deemed more valuable to society just because it's deemed more valuable by society. But with the whole pandemic, we found which jobs are truly essential and which ones aren't. This argument is sort of silly in my opinion, because that would be like comparing the manager to his employees. If they all work a set amount of equal hours, one does not necessarily produce more output than the other. So if you say to get a better job that pays better, well, yeah, that's true. But who's going to do the trucking and transportation if they all go to college or a trade and they find a better job? Technology and AI hasn't gotten to self-automated driving yet. So who's going to do the truck driving and transportation? Who's going to work at Amazon? Who's going to work at delivering food and manufacturing? Who's going to work in the factories? Who's going to work in the food and canning? And who's going to work in factories canning your food that you eat? Who's going to work in these industries if everybody in these industries got a better paying job? Who's going to work in transportation? Who's going to be your bus driver? Who's going to be the person to drive your taxis, insurance carriers, and related activities? I suppose that could be a pretty lucrative industry if you're good at sales. Merchant, wholesalers, non-durable goods. Who's going to work at your stores? Food and beverage stores. Who's going to provide you all these things? Automation hasn't reached, and technology hasn't reached a point where these things can be distributed without humans running these industries. So if everybody in these industries got a promotion or they got educated, then who's going to do these jobs? No one is. So the argument to get a better job is invalid, because someone has to do these essential jobs. as of now at least. Another argument I've seen against hazard pay would be um, your employer should pay you more. Well, you're right. The employer should pay you more. So why aren't you, who's on unemployment benefits, who has more time than ever, why aren't you going around advocating for those who are essential employees, providing goods and services while you make more money than ever on unemployment? You have the time. So why don't you go do that? Why don't you use 10 minutes of your day, because you have 24 hours of your own free time while making passive income through the CARES Act, to go do something about it? Why don't you go advocate? Why don't you go gather all the non-essential employees? Why don't you gather the plus 50 million people making more money than ever on unemployment to advocate for hazard pay and a pay raise for these people who are providing you goods and services? They don't need a thank you from you. They need a pay raise. So why don't you do it? Because you have more time than ever. Essential employees can't unionize because they're too busy working more hours than ever to provide you food and services, because doing the work of 3 men or 3 women, because no one wants to go back to work. Listen, for a lot of these essential employees and a lot of these essential jobs, these people were better off being on unemployment with the way it currently is, because they would have made more financial gains. They would have had more free time to go back to school and focus on their education. If you ask these people in these industries, not necessarily the career based ones, but, well, they can all be careers, but, these kind of jobs are a little, that are deemed a little bit more, um, I guess, not esteemed by society, like really easily repetitive jobs that are very mundane. I don't believe, while there are a few people who actually do love doing these jobs, that if they are given the opportunity to go back to school with a paid scholarship and a paid grant where they can totally focus on their education, I don't believe that these people would want to stay in these industries. Like, do you think that the average store clerk or grocery clerk or Walmart employee or Safeway employee wants to do that for the rest of their life? Do they look happy to you? I worked in retail and it's a good job, but it doesn't really pay for the bills. It doesn't really get you anywhere. It doesn't really bring real sense of purpose. Or someone who works as a merchant wholesaler, maybe. Transportation, a bus driver, maybe. Food and manufacturing, working in a factory, putting a lid on a can, making sure machines work all day. Or being a truck driver, one of the most dangerous jobs in America. Yeah, these things can be great. They have their pros and cons, but if you had given yourself a choice, would you want to do any of these jobs? So even if there were jobs to return to, would you want to do these? Even if they were hiring right now and you're currently on unemployment and you think that there's no jobs, even though there are jobs, would you want to do any of these? America's going to find that a lot of jobs that were taken away are not going to be around, because a lot of these jobs were never really necessities to begin with. So, yeah, you're going to have to, you maybe, if you worked a more prestigious job, quote unquote, you might end up finding yourself working one of these jobs that are deemed essential that no one really ever wanted to do to begin with. And you might have to get used to that point. But as of now, if you're on the CARES Act, if you make less than $30 per hour, and this isn't really accurate for everybody, but with the $600, I believe that might be around $13 an hour, um, 13 or $14 or $15 an hour. I don't know. I'm just rounding on top of my head, but for a lot of people, if you maxed out the CARES Act and unemployment insurance, it caps maybe around 1,250 in most states, I think. At least mine in particular, it caps around there. So it'd be more beneficial for a lot of these people who make less than $30, who maybe work in these industries that are working in fields that they don't really particularly care about, to be in unemployment, to make more money passively or the same amount or slightly less, while having all this free time to learn new skills that can better their earning potential and possibly lead to careers that they potentially enjoy, that bring more meaning to them, to their lives. Even if they end up decreasing it by 500 or 400 or 300, just do the math and then find out whether or not it's suitable for you to file for unemployment. The thing is that I don't particularly care about socialism. I think that a UBI would have been the best thing to have done. It would have been the best thing to implement, because people, whenever you have a choice between making money while doing whatever you want and your freedom, or work doing something you dislike or don't really care about, you're probably going to want your freedom so you can do things you want for your life while making financial gains. So I think essential employees really need to understand that even if they did receive a lump sum of $10,000, it's not really that much. The value of the dollar has depreciated tremendously in the past 5, 10, 15, ever since 1971 when we got off the gold standard. And the value of $10,000 has dropped tremendously since 6 months ago, 7 months ago, 8 months ago. And it's going to drop tremendously in the next 1 to 2 months moving forward. So even if you did receive it, it wouldn't amount to the same that it did before. So essential employees really need to think about what they want to do moving forward. You know, if they don't understand that time is money and that their money is depreciating in value, at least the USD is depreciating in value, well, you might realize that maybe being on unemployment is more beneficial at this point, at least with how current conditions are. Especially if you're in your 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s, 70s, and you want to do something else with your life and you work in these industries that you don't particularly care about. Food for thoughts. The reason why the US is able to pretty much skid on this throughout the years, even though we have a lot of these jobs that have been taken away and have pretty much shown how useless they are or how little meaning they really bring to America, is because we basically, other countries loan us their credit and they buy up our debt. And I don't know, maybe one day all the other nations and countries that we exploit might not no longer want to buy our credit or debt. So America's gonna have to start producing their own goods and manufacture their own things again. So, you know, it's kind of like America at the moment, we're pretty much given our food by a tree. But we're pretty much eating apples, okay? And we get all our apples from this tree. And we don't feed the tree anything. We water it occasionally. Sometimes we throw fertilizer at the tree. But the tree is starting to get to a point where it's big enough, it's old enough where it can sustain itself. And the tree is finding out that we just take more than we give to the apple tree, and that it's better off taking its apples and trading it somewhere else, to someone else who can provide it more water and soil. And eventually, that apple tree isn't going to no longer want to give us as many apples as it used to. Basically, what America is doing at the moment is that we have one apple right now. We have one apple that we have for 2020, and everybody owns a piece of this apple, and it's divided. And what they're doing is that they've the government grabs this apple, and then they divide it even more and distribute that apple. And some of that apple doesn't really exist. So they're taking the apple's future. They're taking the apple from the future that was going to feed Americas in the future, and distributing it to people now. Or they're taking people's saved up shares of apples and they're distributing it away. So they're just cutting up this apple into millions and million pieces and distributing this apple. So there's only one apple, but now It's just being distributed, so it just looks like there's more. And we're going to keep trying to get as many apples as we can from this apple tree until the apple tree stops giving us more apples. I know I sound crazy. I didn't explain this right. But anyway, not to get off into a tangent, but essential employees really need to think about what they want to do moving forward and how to take advantage of this system. Everybody else is. Okay. And if you're an essential employee right now, odds are you're being exploited. Okay. You're a taxpayer. As of now, you're the only one really paying taxes and producing anything. So think about what you want to do.